Everyone thought the lonely boy in the wheelchair was an abandoned orphan, until 5 black fans surrounded him, and he cried out, "Miss Olivia, please don't leave me." The words froze Olivia where she stood, her hands still clutching the warm bread and boiled egg she had bought with the little money she had. Men in black suits poured out of each van, silent, stern, dressed like elite secret agents. They didn't look at anyone except the boy. At first, Olivia thought it was some kind of hospital evacuation drill. But when the last van opened and a tall, powerful man stepped out, sharp-eyed, cold, and clearly someone who wasn't used to hearing the word no, her heart stopped. He walked straight toward the boy, his steps calm but heavy with authority. The entire garden fell silent. Even the night breeze seemed to pause. Then he said just 2 words. "Come on, son." Son? Olivia's knees weakened. Son? The man who looked like a billionaire CEO was here for Charlie? The same Charlie who sat alone every night in a worn-out wheelchair. The same Charlie she had been quietly feeding like a forgotten street kid, was suddenly surrounded by bodyguards and called son by a man who looked like he ruled the country. Olivia's mind spun. And that's when Charlie turned, his frightened eyes locking onto hers. And in a trembling voice, he pointed at her and said, "Miss Olivia, please don't leave me." Her breath caught in her throat. Everyone turned to look at her, as if the quiet janitor suddenly became the most important person in the entire hospital. The silence after Charlie's plea hit harder than any storm. Dozens of black, suited men instantly turned their heads toward Olivia, as if that single sentence had activated something, a protocol, a warning, or a hunt. She couldn't move. Why me? She was just a janitor, a woman who spent every night scrubbing floors that no one even bothered to look at. She didn't belong in this kind of scene. Not between guns, billionaires, and whispered secrets. But Charlie's eyes. They weren't just begging. They were terrified. "Miss Olivia, don't leave me," he repeated, louder this time, and suddenly it felt like every single bodyguard in that garden froze in mid-motion, waiting for her reaction. Mr. Reynolds slowly turned his head toward her, and for the first time she saw it. Not power. Not anger. Fear. As if even he didn't know why Charlie was calling out to her. Or worse, as if he did. Olivia swallowed hard, her feet finally responding. She stepped forward, one slow step after another, her heart hammering in her chest while all those trained agents watched her like she carried a weapon. The bread in her hand was still warm, but her fingers were ice cold. She stopped right beside Charlie's wheelchair. "Charlie," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm here." The boy reached up, his thin hand clutching her sleeve like a lifeline. Mr. Reynolds took one step closer. His voice was deep, calm, but held an edge sharp enough to cut glass. "Who are you to my son?" Olivia opened her mouth, but no words came out. She didn't have an answer. A janitor? A stranger? A friend? A guardian? Before she could speak, Charlie spoke for her. And what he said sent chills through every man in black around them. "She's my family." The word family hit Mr. Reynolds harder than any bullet. For a moment, even the bodyguards exchanged uncertain glances. They had been prepared for threats, for danger, for sudden attack. But not for a little boy in a wheelchair declaring a janitor as his family. Mr. Reynolds' lips pressed into a thin line. His gaze shifted from Charlie to Olivia and back to Charlie again. "Charlie!" His voice was low, controlled, but behind it was something trembling. "Why her?" Charlie didn't hesitate. "Because she's the only one who stayed." Those 7 words landed in the cold night like thunder. A few nurses watching from the hallway gasped softly. Olivia could feel her heart tearing open, powerless, exposed, suddenly carrying a truth she never asked for. She opened her mouth to explain, but Mr. Reynolds raised one hand. Every guard immediately straightened. He took a slow step toward Olivia, not as a CEO, not as a powerful man, but as a father who had just heard something he couldn't understand. "You," he said, eyes locked with hers, "have been staying with my son?" Olivia swallowed hard and nodded. "I only gave him food. He looked lonely. No one else." "That's enough," Mr. Reynolds interrupted quietly. Not angry. Not cold. Just shaken. His gaze softened, and for the first time that night, he finally looked at Charlie with something Olivia hadn't seen in him before. Regret. Then his voice, barely above a whisper. "Charlie, do you want her to come with us?" The boy's answer came immediately. "Yes." He turned, clinging tighter to her sleeve. "If she doesn't come..." "I won't go." Charlie's final words hung in the air like a verdict no one expected. "If she doesn't come, I won't go." For a long, heavy second, no one moved. The bodyguards looked at Mr. Reynolds. The nurses looked at Olivia. And Olivia looked at Charlie, a thin, trembling boy refusing to leave the safety of her presence even when surrounded by everything his father could offer. Mr. Reynolds inhaled deeply, his jaw muscles tightening, then slowly releasing. "Bring her," he instructed in a low voice, not to threaten, but to comply. Even the guards seemed surprised, but they nodded and stepped aside to create a pathway. Olivia froze. She didn't belong in that lane. It looked like the kind of path made for royal families, not for a woman who shared a bed space with peeling paint and rattling fans. Charlie's hand held her sleeve tighter. "Please come with me." Her heart answered before her mouth did. Wordlessly she nodded and took the handles of Charlie's wheelchair as she always did. But this time, she didn't push him back into the empty, forgotten garden. She pushed him into 5 armored black vans, and a world she never knew she was part of. The convoy moved like a military operation. Sirens off, lights dimmed, the night cut in two by the silent power of influence. Inside the van, Olivia sat beside Charlie, her fingers still trembling. He leaned gently against her arm, exhausted but safe. Across from them sat Mr. Reynolds, staring silently, studying her with careful eyes. Not cold. Not angry. Just confused. As if trying to figure out how a woman who earned minimum wage had done what he, in all his power, had failed to do. Make his son feel loved. After what felt like an eternity of silence, Mr. Reynolds finally spoke. "Miss Olivia." His voice softer now, almost hesitant. "How long have you been protecting my son?" Olivia lifted her eyes. Her answer came out as barely more than a whispered truth. "Since the first night I saw him alone." Mr. Reynolds' gaze dropped to the floor. He swallowed, as if her words were far heavier than a simple sentence should be. The van turned. Ahead, massive iron gates slowly opened, revealing a private medical wing unlike anything Olivia had ever seen. Glass walls, doctors already waiting. Charlie stirred. "Will you stay, even if it's scary?" Olivia squeezed his hand. "I'll stay." Charlie smiled and whispered, "Then I'm not scared anymore." The van stopped. The doors opened. Light flooded in. And for the first time in her life, a hospital didn't feel like a place of lonely nights and forgotten names, but the beginning of a truth even Olivia wasn't ready to face. Because deep down, though she didn't know it yet, this wasn't just Charlie's story. It was hers. The convoy rolled through the private gates and into a hidden medical wing that looked more like a presidential bunker than a hospital. Glass walls. White lights. Armed guards on every corner. Olivia stepped out of the van still holding Charlie's hand, and the doctors, the nurses, even the security staff bowed their heads the moment they saw Mr. Reynolds. Charlie was taken inside gently, no longer treated like an abandoned patient, but like royalty. Still, even surrounded by world-class treatment, his eyes never left Olivia. Mr. Reynolds dismissed the others with a wave of his hand and motioned her to follow him down a long, quiet corridor. At the end of it was a private lounge. No guards. Just the two of them. He stood there for a moment, not speaking. When he finally turned around, Olivia saw something in his eyes she never expected to see in a man like him. Guilt. "I owe you an explanation," he said quietly, fingertips pressed together. She stayed silent, afraid of the answer, but even more afraid of not knowing. He took a deep breath. "My son has been sick since he was born. I've taken him to the best hospitals, the best countries, the best doctors, and still I failed him where it mattered most." His voice trembled. "I thought money was enough. I thought keeping him safe meant keeping him away from the world." His gaze hardened, toward himself, not her. "But I never realized I also kept him away from something far more important." He lifted his head. "Love." Olivia's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to tell him that Charlie didn't blame him, that all the boy ever wanted was a hand to hold. But Mr. Reynolds raised one hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "And then you showed up." Their eyes met. "A woman with nothing, giving him everything I never did." He stepped closer, emotion breaking through his usual stoic mask. "So I need to know." His voice cracked. "Who are you, Olivia? Because something deep inside me keeps saying, you're more than just a janitor in my son's story." Olivia's heartbeat stopped. She didn't know it yet. But that night would not only change Charlie's life. It was about to reveal her own. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The hallway suddenly felt too long, the ceiling too high, and his question far too heavy. "Who are you, Olivia?" The words echoed in her mind long after he finished speaking. She lowered her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what you want me to say. I'm just a janitor." Mr. Reynolds shook his head slowly. "No," he replied quietly, pain flickering across his face. "That's not who you are. My son doesn't call just a janitor his family." He walked over to a small table and picked up a stack of files, hospital reports, security footage screenshots, and at the very top, a thin folder marked with her name. "Olivia, background report. I had this run after last night," he said carefully. "Forgive me. I needed to know who the woman was who kept my son alive without ever being asked." Olivia squeezed her hands behind her back, bracing for whatever truth was inside that folder. Mr. Reynolds flipped it open. "Raised in foster care, no known parents, abandoned at birth, no next of kin. Blood type AB negative." He looked up, his eyes narrowing, not with anger, but with sudden realization. "Do you know how rare AB negative is?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Less than 1% of the world. Charlie has it too." Shock rippled through her. She stepped back as if struck. "W, what are you saying?" He placed the file down and stepped closer. Not as a CEO, not even as a father, but as a man who had just pieced together a truth he never thought possible. "I'm saying," he whispered, emotion catching in his throat, "what if Charlie wasn't the only one I abandoned?" Olivia's lips parted, no sound came out. Because deep, deep inside her chest, a memory awakened. A distant voice. A faint lullaby. And a mother's face she never remembered. Until now. Her knees went weak. Mr. Reynolds reached out. "Olivia." She stared at him, tears already pooling. "Are you saying I'm—" He nodded slowly. "Yes. I believe you're my daughter." Olivia stood frozen, unable to breathe, unable to think, as those final words rang inside her chest. I believe you're my daughter. For a second, she felt nothing. And then suddenly, everything. Memories she never knew she had rose like ghosts. A faint lullaby. A gentle hand stroking her head. Warm arms that vanished before she was old enough to remember. Tears filled her eyes. And Mr. Reynolds. Her voice trembled. This can't be possible. He stepped forward slowly, almost afraid that if he moved too fast, she'd disappear. There's only one way to be certain, he said gently. He signaled something, and a doctor appeared at the end of the corridor, carrying a small tray with 2 sterile syringes. A DNA test. Olivia didn't move. Didn't protest. She simply nodded, silently giving her permission. Minutes later, she sat beside Charlie's hospital bed, a cotton ball taped to the crook of her arm. Mr. Reynolds stood nearby, pacing the room in painful silence while the doctor rushed the samples to the private lab. No one spoke. Charlie slowly opened his eyes and looked up at them, his father and the woman who became his world, not understanding the silence, but sensing the weight of it. He reached for Olivia's hand. You're shaking, big sis. She smiled through her tears and squeezed his hand back. I'm okay. I'm right here. 30 minutes passed. Then 50. Every second felt like a lifetime. Finally, the door opened and the doctor stepped in, file in hand, face unreadable. Mr. Reynolds stepped forward. Well? He asked, his voice barely holding together. The doctor took a breath and nodded. 99.9% match. Sir, she's your daughter. Olivia's knees buckled. Mr. Reynolds caught her before she fell, pulling her into his arms the way a father does without thinking. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Then, in a broken whisper, he breathed the words she had waited her entire life to hear. I'm sorry. And I love you, daughter. Olivia burst into tears, burying her face in his chest as Charlie smiled weakly from the bed, tears streaming down his small cheeks. He whispered with all the strength he had. I knew it. Family always finds each other. Tears still shining in her eyes, Olivia slowly stepped out onto the hospital balcony for some air, Charlie resting safely inside, and Mr. Reynolds watching over him like a father who finally understood his role. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She wasn't just a janitor. She wasn't just a forgotten child. She was Olivia Angela Reynolds, a daughter that finally found her father, and a sister who would rather bleed than leave her brother behind. But as she gazed up at the night sky, the same sky Charlie always watched, a shiver crawled down her spine. Because far in the distance, parked near the hospital gates, another black car was watching silently. Engine running, headlights off, waiting. So this story isn't over. Someone else knows who she is now. And they're coming next. Backhand index pointing right. Will Olivia be able to protect her new family? Or will the past she never knew destroy the future she just found? Broken heart to find out what happens next. Don't forget to subscribe, because the next episode will leave you absolutely speechless. Bellhop Bell, subscribe now, so you never miss the next twist.